Today you're flying back to D.C. Well, one, thanks for coming in as always.
Thank you, brother.
Today you're flying back to D.C. What is, let's fist bump. What's your expectations for session in D.C. this year?
I hope we get the border situation locked down. You know, I equate it to, it's sort of like you're out in an old John boat and it starts taking on water, it's got a leak. There's really three scenarios. People panic and don't do anything, which is sort of what we've done with our border. They start bailing, which is the wrong thing to do first. What you do is you stop the leak. You got to have the wall up, and you got to have a system in place with these governments that they understand that we're not going to take their, these folks out of the insane asylums and these criminals that we're getting, these gang members that we're getting, and hopefully stop some of the terrorists that are here. We've got I believe over 100 now. They're on a terrorist watch list that we don't know where they are. And that's very scary, especially with what's going on right now. And so I would hope that we'd stop the wall. I mean, we'd stop the illegal immigration, build the wall, put up a system in place. There's always going to be a need for folks to come in and do work. And of course, the threat is of taking American jobs. And they're not going to, a lot of these jobs, though, frankly, a lot of folks just won't do. That creates a lot of problems. But, you know, and then we refocus our efforts in education back on the trades. And the trades don't have to be, they always include welding and electricians and plumbing, things like that. But of course, beauticians, they make great money. And so I think we need to focus on that. And debt reduction. That's our greatest enemy over the Chinese communists or anybody else, because Chinese communists own a lot of our debt, frankly. But we have to have some fiscal responsibility too. I vote against a lot of bills, frankly, because even if, and people say, well, Burchett, that's going to help us out. Well, we're taking the money from your great-grandchildren. The $200 billion over $200 billion, basically we've given to Ukraine, is, we're paying mortgages over there for people. We're paying retirement. We're doing all these things, and yet the people in Upper East Tennessee and North Carolina, even though we put $100 million into the fund, they're not seeing anything of it. They can't even get housing. They're up there without electricity or clean running water, and that's a disgrace. And that has a lot to do with priorities and, frankly, just the crooked nature of Washington, D.C. And we see that in both parties. You see somebody like myself, I'll never move up in the party structure. I'll never be a chairman of a major committee because of two reasons. You have to, I'll clean it up, you have to polish a lot of apples, and you have to donate money to your conference. And both parties do it. We're at the beginning, I don't have a lot of billionaires that support me, obviously. And so I don't raise the money that a lot of those guys do. But that's the way you get to be chairman. We've literally had people in both parties that have written personal checks, because they're multimillionaires, written personal checks and gotten to be chairman of committees in the past. Not any of the current ones that I know of, but they do have to raise millions and millions of dollars to move up. And that is a crooked situation, because you get how do you raise that money? Well, most of the money I raise is literally under 100 and under kind of things, $5, $10. Sweet little ladies will send me $5 and they'll put a little Bible verse in there, tell me they're praying for my family, and that means so much to me. But a lot of these guys, they can call around the country and because they think they're going to be in charge of the committee that regulates their business. And so it behooves them to give them more money over somebody like myself. And so, and both parties do it. It's no secret. The national media is in on it. I mean, it's printed out. A lot of times they'll print out they call it your dues or whatever. I remember when we got to Congress, I remember AOC was just raising a ton of money. She was raising millions, and she kept it and didn't give it to the conference because they weren't doing what she thought they should be doing, moving as far to the left as they possibly could. And so, and that's kind of the way it works up there.
You all,
It's
Congress,
not kind of the way it is the way it works. Excuse me, yeah.
Before you all came home for the Christmas break, you all passed a continuing resolution. You've been, I don't want to say adamantly against continuing resolutions, but you've voiced your staunch opposition to them. How does that play into your continued point? We need to stop spending money and start focusing on the bills that we're passing when it comes to American tax dollars.
I think I had a conversation with President Trump about that, and he told me that they were going to work on not doing those anymore because we take an oath, and the one thing that the Constitution provides for Congress is to pass a budget. And over 30 years, we have not passed a budget. Can you imagine your church or temple or your place of business or your charitable organization or what have you, or your mom and pop barber shop? They don't have a budget. I mean, that's just crazy. Yet this country has operated over the last 30 years without a budget. So what they do, a continued resolution, is just a continuation of the bad spending policies, of the bloated spending policies that we put in place during COVID, which we were borrowing that money anyway. So now we continue with those things, and I'm always in the national media. They always get on to me about that, and I say, well, tell me what policy and what bill we've passed in the last few years since COVID that has helped bloat this thing, that has made your life better, and what you can't live without. And I dare say they can. I mean, I'm on national, any of the big boys, and they can't, and they always edit it out. But that's the truth. There's just too much in there, and we've got to start somewhere. And one way we can do it, a lot of people in the national media, they love to knock Tennessee, and I get that. I mean, I guess I'm at fault. I wear my Carhartt, and I guess I sound like a big redneck, but and I probably am. But the truth is, in Tennessee, when they pass legislation, they have single-issue spending bills, and that's the rules. You know, you don't pass a dog catcher's bill and then on the back side of it, it's got a pay raise for the legislature. But that's what they do in Washington. They suspend the rules and change everything. Case in point, we passed a huge transportation bill. I serve on the Transportation Committee, and at a marathon meeting, it was, 14 hours maybe. It was during COVID, and it was on the screen. We did it from wherever we were. I kept working that day. I remembered I had meetings, and I had to step out when it was my time to vote, and I had the listening to it in my ear, and then, but we passed this bill, and it was huge, and it was not too awful, but it had a bunch of garbage in it. I voted against it. They took that bill after we passed it to Speaker Pelosi's office with the lobbyist and Speaker Pelosi and her staff, I guess, probably, and they changed everything on that bill. 85% of that bill had nothing to do with what you would call traditional transportation. As a matter of fact, if we took every dollar in that bill, we could have fixed every road, every railroad bridge, every bridge in the country that the federal government had jurisdiction over. And yet 85% of that bill, because she suspended the rules, allowed for no discussion, changed the entire complexity of that bill. And that's what we ended up with. Yeah, it had some great stuff in it for East Tennessee, but the reality is it could have had a lot more if we would just cut out all the woke garbage and all the lobbyists and all the influence that it had. Yet the national media did not pay any attention to that. And that's the kind of thing we need to change, and we need to expose it. And I did expose it, but it took very little fanfare because it's just the way of doing business up there. You pass a bill, you take it into the Speaker's office, you suspend the rules so there's no discussion on the House floor on it, or no amendments allowed, which to me just defeats the purpose of Congress. We might as well just go home. We might as well elect a Speaker and a President and just give them all our money.
One of the most talked about pieces of that continuing resolution was the inclusion or non-inclusion of the Farm Bill, which a lot of people see that as a critical bill that seems to be brought up every time in the conversation of, well, let's cut this help for farmers. Agriculture is Tennessee's leading industry. How critical is that to make sure that we fund something like the Farm Bill and make sure it's there for the folks who do that?
It's very important, but it should be for the farmers. What they've done is they've added food stamps to it. And what is the single largest portion of food stamps is soft drinks. Soft drinks are on that thing. I think that is, and the reason it got on there it was not in there. It was originally. And the soft drink manufacturers went to the Black Caucus and said, you know, we fund a lot of things, we're going to continue to fund a lot of things, and then all of a sudden it became a racial issue that you know, we're attacking food stamps, when no, kids don't need the federal government buying soft drinks for them. I remember when I was in the state legislature and I tried to remove the soft drink machines because it was a boondoggle. We had principals over in Middle Tennessee and that were overseeing. I mean, they had a cash cow and there was no checks and balances. I'm not saying they were stealing it, but they were using it for things that had very little to do with putting a book on somebody's table and teaching somebody to read or write or do arithmetic. And yeah, they do a lot of great things in this community. They sponsor sporting events, they do great things. And they're mad at me every time I bring this up. But food stamps should not be sponsoring soft drinks. And again, that is, we allowed the fox in the hen house, and we allowed that to happen, and nobody's talking about it because they're afraid, you know, that it's going to be labeled as a racial issue. And I'm not against food stamps. I think we need to, we've cleaned up a lot of the fraud, but we need to clean up a lot more. But a lot of it's just corporate greed, and we need to call it out for what it is, and that's why I don't receive a lot of their support. And I'm sure when this airs, oh, you don't understand. Oh, I do understand. I completely understand. And it's, you know, it's just part of the system. But the farmers need to rally to get that out, and we need to expose that. It's the same old adage, though, is why we pass a 3,000-page spending bill. Everybody reads through it, and they see what takes care of their constituency or greases that lobbyist on K Street, let's just be honest. And it takes care of their wife and or girlfriend who might work, say, for a missile defense company or whatever, or lobbies for one of these groups, which should be illegal. And but they say that, well, we're not going to lobby, we're not lobbying my spouse, so, you know, and it's First Amendment, and I get that. But they help write the law, and they figure out a way around it, and this happens every time. And it's very frustrating, and I expose it, I talk about it, I try to pass legislation. It goes nowhere. Everybody talks about it, they run home and say, yeah, we're going to do it, but it's, you know, they'll pass it in the House and never bring it up in the Senate. Case in point, I have a bill that we found out through a buddy of mine, Sean Ryan, who had a guy, his code name is Legend. He doesn't list his, but I know him. And he found out that we were actually funding the Taliban. Every week, not month, year, whatever, every week we send them millions of dollars every week. And it goes through some of the NGOs, non-government organizations, but it's a pretty mapped out path. And you know, these people will hate us for free. They pretty much swear to an oath to they want to kill Christians and Jews, and that puts me right in there, and I am on their, apparently I was told that I'm on one of their list of people that they would like to take out, and I get that, but American tax dollars should not be going to that. I passed the bill in the House. I can't even get Chuck Schumer to even look at it in the Senate, and part of the problem they do that is they'd have to admit they did something wrong. And again, outside influences, lobbyists, NGOs, what have you, somebody's getting a cut off of it somewhere. And you know, it's just calling it like it is, and it makes people a lot of people uncomfortable. And the left and the right both, because they're all got their beak in it, getting a drink.
Another thing going to come up in the next couple of weeks, speakership. President-elect Trump has said that he backs Speaker Johnson. Yeah. You don't not back Speaker Johnson, but you weren't happy with the continuing resolution. Sure. Seems like the wheel that you don't like continues to spin. Where do you stand on that?
I'll pray about it, and I'll make up my mind. The election will be tomorrow at some point, and I'll work on that. And I've been in contact with the Speaker and the President multiple times, and there's some things I'm concerned about, and I'll make up my mind. Then I'm not going to rush into it. I represent a lot of people that agree that we need to get these things under control, and I need some kind of agreement between the President and the Speaker that's where it's going to go, because you got to realize we can't afford to lose any more votes, whoever the Speaker is, because Thomas Massey out of Kentucky has already said, I'm not voting for it, and he won't. So that leaves, they got one other person, and I have stepped out on that ledge before, as you know, the former speaker. I didn't like some things that were going on, and things that I won't discuss here that were behind the scenes that I knew about. I think you got to have somebody that tells the truth, and to me personally, and Mike, or Speaker Johnson, he's not lied to me. He has a tough job. You know, you have honestly, one bad case of flu goes through the Capitol, and we're not in the majority, literally. And they have to count heads. They have a whip team that counts to make sure. They say, if you're going to be gone, you got emergency. They understand that. You know, people die, family members are sick, things are going on, anniversaries, whatever, weddings, and you got to go. And you got 435 people, and they have to make sure that we're in the majority of that bunch.
If it's not Speaker Johnson, is there a name folks should watch out for?
Yeah, I mean, there's always. My friend Byron Donalds out of Florida is always a contender. He's in the national spotlight. He works well with President Trump.
Name tossed around for the Florida Senate seat that's open.
Yeah, that's true. And I could see that happening, but we'd have to be out of the majority, and we'd have to schedule things so that could work. Also, of course, Jim Jordan out of Ohio, he's always a contender. He's chairs the judiciary, former chair of the Freedom Caucus, conservative, stalwart, has the name recognition. I'm very close to both those people. The guys, I'll talk to them, and you're always, my dad was in the Second World War, and and I always give this analogy. It's kind of gruesome, but when they were hitting the island on Peleliu, 1st Marine Division. Probably never heard of it, but if you watch a TV series called The Pacific, it was Band of Brothers. Spielberg and Tom Hanks did it, and it was very accurate. It was a guy named E.B. Sledge who wrote a book with the old breed at Peleliu in Okinawa. My daddy knew E.B. Sledge. They were buddies, and I can remember Daddy going to visit him, and they were friends, and it's very graphic, but Daddy said when he was on those amphibious crafts, when they were hitting Peleliu, his first island he'd ever been in combat, which is one of the most gruesome battles the entire war, not the Pacific and the Atlantic, but the total war. And Daddy said he looked on the front of that amphib, and there was this young Marine. He was talking tough, and I'm going to get those blankety blanks. And then Daddy was in the middle, and he looked in the back, and there was this old guy. And had some of those Marines that actually been in World War I, and had been in other islands. And he was kind of muttered, keeping to himself, probably praying and smoking a cigarette, had his helmet on, and kind of keeping to himself. And Daddy looked and said, "That's the guy I'm going to go with." And sometimes that first guy off that amphibious craft is the one that gets killed. And the first person that runs might be the guy that gets killed, or gal. We have some strong women in our caucus conference too. So I'm kind of looking to see who that guy in the back of the amphibious craft that's been there before, that doesn't get out front too early, if that were to occur. But Speaker Johnson is down to about 3 or 4 people. Victoria Spartz, she's Ukrainian American, very passionate about the issue, wasn't going to run, then decided to run, and then won with, I think, 30 or 40% of the vote or something, because other people had jumped in. And she could throw a monkey wrench into the thing too. She's very concerned about spending, as I am. And so there's several that could throw a monkey wrench into it, and then you see the second, third tier come up. So it's a long answer. I'm sorry. It's not as simple. I know we're running out of time.
As you sit here,
you
not
can
a
edit
yes or
this
a no
thing
vote
out
right now.
Yeah. Do what?
As you sit right now, not a yes or a no vote on Speaker Johnson yet.
Yeah, I'll pray about it. I like Mike, or Speaker Johnson. He and I are very close. Our beliefs are very similar, religious and others. He's a family man. They made fun of me on national media because I said he doesn't cheat on his wife. But I guess my mentor in the state legislature and the state senate was a guy named Ben Ashley. And Ben Ashley told me, he said, "Tim," he said, "a guy cheats on his wife, and he said he will probably do just about anything, stay in power." And Mike doesn't do that. He's a family man. He's not real flashy, and he like me. He wasn't the first guy they picked on the kickball team at West Hills Elementary School, and he came up kind of tough. His daddy was a fireman, and he lost his dad in a bad accident and later died. And took on a kid, didn't have to, and a lot of people are critical of him on that. But he's got a real heart for this thing, and he loves our country. And I think given the right support, he could do the job. And a lot of conservatives are mad at him, but like I said, 3-person majority, and he's got to protect those guys from New York as well as the people down south.
Yeah, especially the toss-up states
Yeah,
and toss-up districts. Let's go a couple rapid fire because I know you need to get out of here.
No, I'm sorry.
No, no apologies at all. What do you want to see President-elect Trump, get done in his first 90 days in office? Top priority.
The wall, get a program in place, and start cutting money. DOJ is saying they're going to cut $2 trillion. We put $1 trillion on our debt load every 100 days. You've got to do some serious cuts, things like Department of Education. Shut it down, send that money to the states. Our states and our state legislatures and our local school boards are more accountable. It would pay teachers more. There's not one bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. that's taught a kid to read, write, or do arithmetic at Sarah Moore Green Elementary School, I can guarantee you. They're worse than the mob. They take more off. The Lord only takes 10% in tithe, and they sure as heck take a lot more. And when Jimmy Carter created the Department of Education, we were #1 in the world in education. By some parameters now we're 21st or 22nd. And I have a degree in education, so I follow that pretty close.
You mentioned him, President Carter's death, reaction to that.
Yeah, it was sad. He lived a great life, 100 years. I didn't agree with his policies. I've often said we're never going to elect a Ronald Reagan until we elect a Jimmy Carter. And, we're not going to re-elect a Donald Trump until we elected a Joe Biden. So, and I don't, he was a man of faith. I remember those days very well, the peanuts. I can remember there was even a peanut fishing plug. I wished I'd have bought it. Probably a collector's item now. But, and Billy Beer and it was some rough economic times. I can remember you had to have your license plates were even and odd, the last numbers, and that decided on which days you could get gasoline. Iran was a disaster. Again, I think he was a very nice man, but I don't want, and he was a Sunday school teacher, I honestly don't want a president that's going to teach my daughter at Sunday school class. I want somebody that, like Soleimani, who was a terrorist. You know how they identified him? Do you? You and I talked about this a week ago by one of his fingers, a ring on his finger. Ring finger. He had this unusual ring, and I've seen the pictures, and it's very graphic, but they were classified now. I think it's out in the public domain, so I can talk about it, but it was, that's how they identified that guy. And Trump didn't ask for permission from the United Nations. When he sent 90 cruise missiles to Syria, he told Xi Jinping, Chinese guy, they were eating together, and having them pretty confident information that guy comes in and whispers something to President Trump, and I'm sure he was eating the most delicious chocolate cake ever, as he would describe it. And Xi Jinping and his wife and President Trump and his wife were there, and it was a very intimate setting. And the guy comes in and whispered in Trump's ear, and Trump says to Xi Jinping, we just sent 90 missiles, to Syria. And Xi Jinping puts his fork down and looks at Trump and says, they shouldn't have been gassing kids. He picks up his fork. That's what we need. We got to have somebody who's a little bit of a cowboy. They don't need to check with Speaker Pelosi. They don't check with the people that want to throw our country down the tubes in Congress. They don't need, sure as heck, don't need to check with the United Nations. Need somebody that's going to react. And that's why I think Trump will succeed. Things like Panama. He's not going to take over Panama. But in the back of their mind, they're thinking, this cowboy might try this. And that's why we need a better rate at the Panama Canal.
Right now, one of the most talked about topics in the country are drones flying anywhere, everywhere. You've been smack dab in the UAP discussion.
Yeah.
What can you release? What do we know?
Sure. We're spending tens of millions of dollars studying something. Federal government will tell us they don't exist, yet the federal government will tell me in other meetings that they do exist, that something is going on, something we don't understand. Breakfast with a NASA engineer, former and somebody asked him kind of smart aleckly, because I was sitting there, what do you think about the UFOs? And he looked at the guy and said, we don't know. He said, I don't know if it's a wormhole. I don't know. We just don't know. They're doing things that defy everything we are taught in physics. And this guy was one of the top engineers. And so with the drones, it's the Chinese have involvement in it. They monitor everything we do. When that balloon flew over this country, they picked up information, but look, they got members of Congress that are actively seeing Chinese communist spy. We had a United States senator who just passed away. Her driver was a known Chinese communist spy for over 10 years. They're in. Mike Pompeo told me they've infiltrated. We found them even in PTA meetings because they're looking at the long-term picture. They're in our colleges and our universities. They are in our national defense situation. We had 2 Chinese spies. Wasn't talked about much, but we can talk about it now, that were in our United States Navy. They were Navy officers, and they were sending information back to China. So Chinese monitored that balloon. It wasn't the information they were getting, they were monitoring our response. They were tacticians, and we failed, and we were gutless. Our president let it go, our military let it go, our intelligence let it go, and we failed. Then we shot it down, and now they won't release what was on that, what the capabilities of that were. I happen to know they were pretty extensive, but what were they doing with the drones? They're either contracting with them, somebody unbeknownst or beknownst, some treasonous person or others. But the main thing is the Chinese are monitoring our response. And now nobody's talking about it, but my friends tell me it's still going on. New Jersey, why was New Jersey picked? New Jersey is one of the most complacent areas or willing to comply with the federal government when COVID shut everything down. Their churches, their places of worship, their businesses, everything. They got in line, they put their mask on, they studied that. There's a reason that happened there. Now, 3 reasons. Our press doesn't cover it anymore. That's what they want to see. Our military did not respond. Our president was gutless. What did Trump say? I'll shoot them down. I think they know what's going to happen. But imagine this, one of our enemies has a submarine off the coast of New York. 50, 100 drones come up. They have about a 90 to 180 minute life in the air. Then maybe they have some new things, solar and things, they can go a lot longer. Say they launch one of these things and it hits maybe New York, has a biological entity in it, has a dirty bomb, has a nuclear bomb, a small nuke, that's very capable. We have countries that are capable of doing that. I think we better realize what's going on, and I think we better get control of it. Just on the to say that there's no problem. If one of those things gets sucked in a jet, I'm flying out today to D.C. One of those things gets sucked into a jet engine, that jet's going to go down. We better get control of it, and right now we have no control of it. And the Chinese are monitoring that. They have the capabilities, we were told, it's been released, there's been articles about it, and I believe it to be true, that they have capabilities of possibly shutting down some of our top fighter jets, $500 million implements, kill Americans. Well, if we get into a conflict with China or something they don't agree with, and we're flying, and they have the capability of shutting our planes down or any other entity in our arsenal, that's dangerous, or possibly turning it on us. And that's why Trump is saying, let's make this stuff in this country, or at least onshore type thing, somebody that's friendly to America, because China is not.
2 quick last questions. Reaction to the terror attack in New Orleans?
I'm not surprised. I think you're going to find out that these folks, our military has been compromised. There's some aspect of that, we have this DEI stuff, and people get angry when I say this, but our military has one job, really, and that's to protect the Constitution, foreign and domestic. And they are very good people we call on to do some very bad things. And when we send a man out in a dress to recruit young Americans for the military, that sends the wrong message, and our enemies see that, and they know we're vulnerable. And I know this guy was an American citizen, maybe a 1st or 2nd generation, but we need to start watching where these people are coming from. And when they say they want to destroy us in their religion, I think we better start listening to that, and we better start acknowledging that, because these folks are here. We don't know all the details, but it's pretty apparent. I believe they'll come out and say that these guys were at the same area when they were trained. Possibly they got their vehicles or bought them through the same avenue. You'll hear all that, and then it'll go away. The story will go away. You've got an FBI, not at the local and regional area, but at the national level that has been compromised. And they do not like this country, and they do not like the people in it, and they consistently have not told America the truth about what's going on. We are in a very vulnerable state right now, and we will continue to be for quite some time. And our enemies are watching us, they're here, and we need to pay very close attention. We're currently funding a lot of our enemies. They have our implements, they have billions of dollars we left on the ground in Afghanistan. They claim they can't fly the helicopters, they can't do that. But you know who can? You know who was on the ground before, when Americans pulled out? The Chinese. And they are gonna sell those implements, they're gonna fund terrorism all over the world. They'll hate us for free. We need to quit giving them our money to do it.
Where you sit right now, and you probably alluded to it at the beginning of this interview, from where you sit right now, what do you believe is the single greatest threat to the United States?
Our debt. Our debt. Americans are currently, East Tennesseans are paying $600 to $1,000 more out of pocket than they were 4 years ago. And it's tough. People are struggling, paycheck to paycheck. They're got their heads down. They don't have time to pay attention to what's going on in the world. And I guess that's our job in Congress. We need to get control of this thing because it's all, the Chinese own our debt. We're weakened. Our priorities are changing, and I think we need to get back in the game.
Anything else we left out you feel like you need to add?
Yeah, pray for our country. I think we're a people of faith. I think we need to ask God. He's told us if we'll humble ourselves, He'll show us what we need to do. And I ask Him to do that every day. I lay awake at night, and I think about that. I get 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night because I've seen, I knew what I was getting into when I got to Washington. I guess my biggest surprise was that I wasn't surprised. But I guess what I am surprised is America's complacency in allowing this nonsense to go on. And we're in a very dire situation. I wished I could talk about everything that I know because it would, but it's not good.
Well, I'll book you for 2 hours next time. How's that sound?
We'll do it.
If you're good, I'm good.
Thanks, brother.
Appreciate it.